Welcome everyone to our candidate question and answer with candidates for House District 41. We have running on the Democrat side of the primary, Democrat Andy McDaniel, the incumbent, Charlene Herring, also Democrat, and then on the Republican side, we have Jennifer Brecheisen, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're right. Excellent. So just a reminder to everyone out there listening, SC for Ed is very much a nonpartisan organization. We do not advocate for political parties. We certainly don't advocate for particular candidates. But what we do want to happen is for people to come to the polls well-informed and prepared to make votes that are in favor of public education in South Carolina. So the purpose of these Q&As that we're doing around the state to prepare for all this is to make sure that you have as much information as possible to help make an informed decision when you get to the polls. So I'm going to start with just an opportunity for each person to maybe take 2 or 3 minutes, just talking a little bit about yourself and your platform. And we'll start with Charlene.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I am so delighted that we have 2 other candidates who are educators by some means or whatever that are interested in serving as a public servant for our teachers as well as other people in our district. So thank you both to those of you who are running. Well, I am Charlene Herring. I am in Ridgeway, South Carolina. I have a career in education. I'll always be a teacher at heart. I've been a teacher, a curriculum coordinator, a principal, a chief academic officer, and even an educational consultant. And one of the reasons I am running because I do want to be a voice for education. I think my experience will lend an invaluable knowledge to what we can do to help teachers more, which is education certainly is the backbone of our country. I want to use my career in order to make a real difference. And one of those is just basically regarding having qualified teachers in the classroom. I think that is the key to everything. There's so many issues out there, and there's so many things that teachers want. But again, we have to start with that qualified teacher because of all things, small class size, all the materials in the world, it's the teacher in the classroom who makes the difference in a student's education.
Thank you. Andy McDaniel.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, SC for Ed, for inviting me, and thank you for having this forum. And I echo my opponent, Charlene, in saying thank you to my opponents who are willing to step out and make a difference in the form of government. I would just like to say that, yes, my name is Annie E. McDaniel. I am a lifelong resident of Fairfield County. It has always been my goal and my objective to give back to my community, picking up on the portion of Chester that encompasses House District 41, along with a portion of Richland County. Being educated in Fairfield County and just growing up there, had an opportunity to see a lot of things that I thought needed to make the county and the district better. So I decided to run because I thought I could offer up, since I'm educated there, as I stated, since I've worked with the Fairfield County Council, I've worked with the school district, I've had some dealings with finance in higher ed and also in healthcare. So my main goal and reason for running was just to give back. Graduated from USC with a major in accounting, and then went back and received my master's in public administration. And I've told you a little bit about my work history. I've been very involved in civic engagement. My sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, we are always involved in community and public service. I chaired our social action committee for several years. And what we do there is we're very engaged in what goes on at the State House. We monitor legislation. We are a voice for the voiceless, and we are advocates for many different areas. I served on Fairfield County School Board for 18 years. So that is my primary interest. But once getting to the State House, I realized that there are so many issues that need our attention and that we need to be involved with. So, but I was appointed by the speaker to the 3M committee. So I've learned a lot about municipal, medical, military, and public affairs. So there's a lot of work there to be done. I'm since I've been there, I've joined quite a few organizations, the Military Affairs Committee, Legislative Black Caucus. I am a state director with the National Women in Government organization for South Carolina. So I've gotten really, really involved, learned a lot, got my feet wet. I think I've done a great job addressing a lot of concerns that has been expressed to me, and would just love the opportunity to continue the great work that I've started. So thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Brecheisen.
Hi. So I am probably the oddball here because I don't have a background in education in any way. But I do have 3 children that have come through the public education system in South Carolina. One has already graduated. One is graduating this year. And I've become a teacher of sorts for them too, which through this coronavirus thing. And then one is in kindergarten here in Chester County Schools. And he is actually autistic. And I am a wedding photographer, so I have nothing to do politically with the government. I've always been very active in online, but not really in person. And I thought, you know, it's time to actually step out and do something. And I'm limited with what I can do, having my children and everything. But really what inspired me to run were different things like our freedoms of speech. I know that's important for teachers to be able to say what they want to say and not suffer repercussions in their personal lives. Our freedoms of speech, our freedoms in general. And I feel like at a state level, we can accomplish a lot more, just like children are individuals. And I believe they need individual attention within the school system. Districts and counties and states are individuals as well that should be treated differently. So I want to say one thing about my son Apollo and the school system in Chester. So Chester ranks like 500 out of 600 in South Carolina. Even though we have 1,200 schools, it ranks really, really low. And I know Fairfield County ranks in the 200 to 400 range, but Chester ranks really low. But if it wasn't for this school system, he would not be anywhere near where he is. We thought he would be nonverbal. We had him in therapies from the age of 2 years old or 18 months. And it was just a couple months after he started at school that he actually started talking. And then a year later, full sentences or phrases. And then now in kindergarten, he's in regular kindergarten and he's speaking full sentences. So without the educators and the speech pathologists and all the therapists that he's had, he would not be where he is because I would have had no idea what to do. So I really feel like it's important that we really invest in all of our children, even the ones that have the extra special needs. So with that being said, that is me right now. So
Great, thank you. So we'll begin with our first question, and Annie, why don't you start us off on this one? It's, what is your opinion of the state of public education in South Carolina today?
Okay, did you say me, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that question. State of public education. Oh my gosh, that is a huge question. I think that there's a lot that we're doing. There's a lot that's going on in public education. There are a lot of students, obviously, that are benefiting from public education. But I also believe that there are a lot of students that are not benefiting as much as they should. And I don't think it's any one person's fault or any blame. I think it's a holistic problem that we all must continue to work together to try to solve. I know in the legislature, we had someone come speak to us because we dropped, to the bottom as it relates to education. But like I said, I believe that there are a lot of students who are doing extremely well. I think there's a lot that needs to be done legislatively. And of course, minimally adequate is probably one of our biggest and largest enemies and distractions for public education. But I think regardless of that, and hopefully one day we'll get that language changed, that everyone continues to do the best that they can. I think that the legislature and government should do a better job in funding our public education system and ensuring that where those funds are needed, that those funds are there, which I guess in other words, I'm saying there should be equitable funding. And every child, whether they're gifted, special needs, poverty, homeless, every child should be afforded the opportunity to rise to their fullest potential. Every single one of them. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done in that area so that we can ensure that that happens. And also so that our students will be ready for graduation, ready for the workforce, military, higher ed, wherever they choose to go when they graduate. I think our students should be ready to go. I think the spirit as it relates to our public education system is great. You know, our students, for the most part, I think they love going to school. They love what they do. Definitely our teachers and staff. But we must fund education where it needs to be. We must have an accountability system so that we can ensure that where there are gaps for whatever reason, that we're able to close those gaps and we're able to give the professional development if we find that it needs to be greater, so that we can ensure that so that it's there. Now, as far as real quickly, just for my opponents coming to the State House, you know, it's really a fight when we know, and I can tell from what both of them are saying that they're concerned and that they know what needs to be done, but convincing all of my colleagues what needs to be done, and then we're doing that. And I think we're making a dent, and I think I'm making a dent in trying to share with them the various aspects. And I love to tell people, you know, if you're not at the table, then you becomes part of the menu. So if we're not sharing with them and helping them to understand why the need is much greater than what they think it is, then they would never want to do anything to correct it. So I'm working very hard to try to help them change their mindset and understand all that goes into the public education system and all that needs to occur for us to get where we need to go, particularly since I worked as a business manager for years in several school districts in the state, as well as served on the school board. So I have knowledge from both sides as it relates to education. Thank you for the question again.
All right, same question to you, Jennifer Brecheisen. What's your opinion on the state of public education in South Carolina today?
I really think that it just depends on, well, I know nationally, like we only have like a 44 and 43% proficiency in reading and math. So I know that we're really low as a state. And I think that reading comprehension is extremely important. Well, definitely math proficiency as well, but without reading, we can't really get, cognitively, there are other things that we can't do, that children can't do if they don't have proficiency in reading. But I think that our state, you know, you look at districts like Charleston and Fort Mill, and they are really, really great. And then you look at districts kind of in the middle, like Fairfield, and then you look at the districts like Chester County who are kind of low. So I think that my opinion would be that it varies across the state. And I definitely think there is room for improvement, especially in a lot of our low income areas. So, yeah.
Thank you. Same question, Charlene Herring.
Well, first of all, I do want to applaud our schools and education in South Carolina regarding one factor. More than ever, schools have become the constant institution in children's lives. We do everything for them. Not only are teachers, you know, supposed to teach, but we also care for them after. We look after their mental health. We feed them. We do everything. And I think with the responsibility has been greater. And I do think that there's always room for improvement. But also, I know that our teachers are reaching out. I know that we do need funding. That's certain. We do need to have, early childhood education. We need to have younger children in school, because we know that when a child comes to school in first grade and has read, 500 books, and another child comes, doesn't even know his ABCs. And of course, a lot of this is related to poverty. So funding certainly would help that as we move forward. I do know as we look at South Carolina, when we look at SAT scores or whatever, we have to remember in South Carolina, every child is given the opportunity for SAT testing or any kind of test. In some states, you have to be in the top percentile point in order to take the SAT. So that puts us at a disadvantage. There are many schools in South Carolina who are doing a great job. There are other schools that are trying very hard, but they need some help. They need more guidance or whatever. And regarding our schools, I think it's wonderful for the school districts who offer choice within this. When the schools, maybe it's a school within a school, or maybe it's a magnet program to best meet the needs. My hope is that education in South Carolina will offer every child the opportunity to be there the best they can be and to go as far as they can do. And I think we can do that by reexamining some of the things we do and maybe some more flexibility in the money we are already receiving to meet the needs. And I think, again, it's, working with people, it's collaborating, it's mentoring other districts who are successful, mentoring those, who need some help. But again, we've come a long way, but there's still far to come. But there are things that we can do, tangible things that may not have to come just from the House, but could come from some creative problem solving and flexibility in our spending.
Thank you. So moving on to the second question, we'll start with Jennifer Brecheisen. You all just addressed a number of different things in talking about the state of education in South Carolina today. So this is a question that speaks a little bit to priorities. If elected, what would be your first step to improve public education? What would you want to work on first?
Well, I think it's a two-part thing, because I think we need more teachers. And I think to effectively get more teachers, I think we need to give higher salary to the teachers that we already have. The people coming in, give raises to the teachers that we already have. Because I think that the class sizes are too big right now. So more one-on-one time with those teachers, I think, would really impact it would just really help, because they could actually be more specific with the kids, being with that more one-on-one time. So I would definitely say bringing more teachers to the table and raising the pay for the teachers that we already have.
Same question, Charlene Herring.
I believe my first thing would be to look at keeping qualified teachers in the classroom, retention. I believe we have teachers who are very qualified, but I think the demands of teaching have become so great, and they want to do this, but it's exhausting. I think from some research, we know that teachers leave the profession 5,000 to 6,000 every year. And some of the reasons are because they need to have more time during the day to plan to work on the work. They work all day and then they go home and work all night. And I think there's some creative ways you can do this. I know in Richland, too, when I was there, we had a late start for high schools on a Wednesday, so the teachers would have more time to plan. They still get their defined minimum program, minutes in, but again, it gives teachers time to work on that work. Also, I believe that teachers do need to have, their professional development really personalized, because teachers are at different levels, and a beginning teacher will need something quite different than a seasoned teacher. So to look at that regarding content as well as working with students. Another thing I believe is that teachers do need increased respect from students, from parents, from other colleagues, Sometimes that has to do with discipline, but we need to work there, more cooperative spirit there, to see that, again, we're respecting our teachers. We're listening to them. I'm so glad that the House finally had these forums where they were listening to teachers, because often we try to do things or put money in places where if we'd listen to the teachers first, we try to do it to them rather than listening to them and say, what are your needs? What can we do to help? But also, compensation. I agree with Jennifer. We have to be able to compensate our teachers for what they do. No other profession, I think, demands as much. And it is a profession, so it does demand more. But again, we have to be able to attract them. I'm not sure if we still do national board certification, which keeps some teachers in because of the extra pay. But there's many things. So mine would be is teacher retention. I think if you can retain teachers, because we can add all these other programs and stuff, if we don't have the teachers to teach them, it's not really moving us forward. So retention of teachers.
Annie McDaniel, what would you prioritize?
Oh my God, it's a lot. But I'll see if I can't narrow it down some with my experience and involvement that I've encountered. I think first of all, Chris, is to determine the difference between school boards and state as relates to House District 41, and ensuring that people know what school boards are responsible for and what they can do to make districts better versus what the state can and does to make it better. As my opponent stated, of course, funding and retention of teachers is definitely at the top. But we must always remember that we have the teachers, we have the parents, we have the students. And we need to listen to all three holistically to determine what the problems are. And sometimes we have to not shoot a bullet, but try to deal and drill down to students individually. But on the state level, the things that we control most is funding. And the laws as listed in Statute 59 regarding our school districts and how they operate. I know when we had the bill that come up here just this past session, we have to understand that the majority party is usually the one that can make things happen. But as a minority member, we must always communicate with them, as I stated in my opening statement, helping them to understand based on our experiences and our exposure what needs to be there. But I think even with the money and the teachers, if we're not listening to the needs of the individual students, if we're not listening to the needs of the individual teachers, if we're not listening to where parents are, and if we don't meet the students where they are, it's difficult for us to make a difference and even prioritize. But I think that professional development, we need to ensure that we have enough money once we listen to the teachers, once we listen to the parents, once we listen to the students, make sure that we have enough money for professional development so that the teachers and the administrators and everyone else involved can have a better idea of what they need to put in place, so they can have money to travel, so that they can see what best practices exist, so that if the demographics and many other things are the same mixed with what we know from being in that district, then we can employ some things that can make those positive changes that we need. And then I think also very important is partnerships. You know, making sure that the state and making sure that we have laws in place that foster partnerships within the communities with our school districts to help make them better. So I guess sorry about that. My phone started ringing. Sorry about that. But anyway, so I guess the bottom line is just the retention and funding that's already been stated, and then the investment in the process to make sure that we have professional development, to make sure that we have avenues for listening, and making sure that we address, once we listen and hear those things that are needed, as we try to reduce the stress for teachers and make students more willing and wanting and happy to learn.
So I will begin with Charlene Herring on our third question. So the state legislature goes about establishing what the formula is that determines how we fully fund public education in South Carolina. And by that own measure, we've not fully funded education here in the state in 11 to 12 years. When educators go to the state house, what we're oftentimes heard is, we would love to do it if you can find the money. We all know that we want to fully fund education, but there's also many concerns about how to do it. So how do you propose that we address the funding issue for education here in South Carolina?
Well, I think that is a big, big question. I always feel like we put our money where our priorities are. And again, as I said, education, next to a person's faith and their family, education is most important. And I think that sometimes we have to make it a priority. And I know now, even with the budget and this next year, and because of the pandemic and all the things that have happened, you know, wanting to give teachers those pay raises, you know, may not be possible, you know, with what's happening. But that is a big question. My commitment is, I don't know, but I think there's ways you can do. I think some of it could be in flexibility of the funding that comes from the state level, that we can use in different ways in order to, you know, fund education as it should be. Right now, you know, personally, my commit would be to find those ways. And if anybody knows me, having been a mayor of a town or whatever, we had very little money, but I went after. There were various means and sources that's able so that we could not only live in our town, but the quality of life would be improved. So I wish I knew what that was. And I guess if they knew at the State House, they would have already done it now too, but that'll be something that'll have to be investigated, and maybe looking at other states and districts and what they have done and how they make this happen. It may be, where they draw their source of funding for the education besides the lottery and things like that. That's what we have to look into.
Andy McDaniel.
Thanks again, Chris. Well, there's many different sources of funding coming into the state, but the pivotal question is, we know the money is needed. We know that there's money coming in. How do you pierce the hearts of those folk who are on Ways and Means and making sure that when the budget comes to the full floor to debate, that the willingness is there to listen and the willingness is there to make some of the changes that need to be made. We have fee in lieu of in our school districts, where our county councils and will get together with the Department of Commerce and they'll negotiate companies coming in. Well, what I find is that school districts are not necessarily at the table, and the school districts need to be there because that's lost funding that goes to county council. And I understand that it creates jobs, but I also understand that every company coming into any community should want the education to be the best that it can be. So I think, and I introduced legislation last year, and now that I'm more keenly aware of getting legislation through, even though I was the first freshman to get a bill passed, I would definitely be working that particular bill and reintroducing it in the next legislative session, so that, and there was support for it that came also from municipalities, so that there monies that are lost, particularly for education, doing fee in lieu of when new industries come in town, can be more discussed at the table with educators. We have a lot of items in the state where sales tax is not being charged. I think that Senator Fannin started that fight when he first, and probably I think even before he became a senator. I think we need to continue to pursue things where we can have more sales tax generated. And I know with the pandemic, a lot of money has been spent, a lot of money has come down from the federal government, and there's a lot of issues that we're going to have to address. But we have to, as you asked us earlier, we have to prioritize, and we have to put our monies and our funds where they are most needed in order to grow our state and make sure that our human capital is the best that it can be. So those are just two of the things. I know the funding formula has been discussed. There's been some resistance to the ones that has been proposed, but it's also important to get the word out. I think you have a great group that can get the word out and call your legislators. Let them know what your preference is. Let them know what you want to see happen. Let them know that it's okay to increase this, to not increase sales tax on all items, but on some items, so that there could be some equitability in funding. Call the legislators. When you know your legislator is with you in what you believe in, then it should not stop there. You have to also call and assist with the other ones so that they can help understand. So I think those are just a few ways, and we can increase and ensure that the funding for the teachers is there. So and all I can say is God bless me to go back. I will continue to fight because I do understand how the funding formula works.
Jennifer Brecheisen. So funding, how might we address funding?
I think that we have to take a multifaceted approach with funding, just like many other issues that we have. It's like Annie said, the funding comes from so many different places, and we don't all know where it comes from. Even as a legislator, she may not even know where exactly it all comes from. And I think that we need to have more accountability on that and figuring out exactly where it's coming from, as far as and where it's going. I think that we need more, not accountability on how it's spent, but I think that we need to, I think each district needs to figure out how to spend their funding the best way. I think it should be more of an individual school district process as well, because what someone needs here may not be needed, in another district. I also think that as a community, and this has always been a big thing for me. We talk about funding, schools have fundraisers all the time. And I never know as a parent exactly, it's just going to the school. And then I have some really high priced item I'm supposed to buy, like some gift wrap or something. And I would rather just give like $50 to the school. I would rather the school tell me, hey, this is what we need, and this is what we want to raise $150,000 by 2019 December. And I think that communities can really, really rally behind things like that. Where I also think that it's like Annie was saying, things could be moved around when it comes to funding. So her idea of people calling their legislatures, I don't think that people even know a lot of times who their legislators are. And I think that the more active we can be in informing people and letting them inform the legislators what they want, it's like Charlene was saying, our children are so important and we should put our money where our mouth is. What do we value? What do we love? And our children are precious and they're our posterity.
So our final question, I'm going to begin with you, Annie. And this one doesn't cost a dime. But in your opinion, what do you think a successful accountability system would be for education in South Carolina? What might that look like? How should we be assessing how we're doing in the classrooms and in our schools and their districts?
Well, first, I know you're asking in the classroom, but I think it's twofold. Chris, we have the education, the curriculum, academics component, and then we have the finance component. And I think accountability should exist in both. So I'll address the finance first, since that's where most of my experience is. I noticed the state already have a fairly decent system where they send auditors out to review and make sure funds have been done separately and offer recommendations if they have not, or where they maybe could have been utilized better. But most of the audits are done 3 years behind. So as they find needs of improvement, it's 3 years behind. So I think that we can do a better job of looking at audits, because districts are required to do an audit every year. Reviewing those audits, they tell the finance professionals a lot as to how the money has been spent and where it maybe could have been spent better. And I think we need to do a better job of enhancing how we assist districts when it comes to spending funds, particularly in our rural areas. They may just not know. And I think having someone to come out and just kind of do that review on a more frequent basis, like maybe once a year, and offer suggestions on how the money is being spent, I think is a great thing. And also the requirement for building fund balances. I think the state should be responsible for every school district if something occurs, and should spend the money that's generated for a district that year, not setting aside 5%, 4%, just in case something happens. I think the state should be there for school districts so that those funds could be utilized. I know there's some districts with $8, $9, $10 million, in fund balances. But again, I think that should be burdened by the state, and those funds should be spent on those students in the year that they are collected. On the academics side, I think that, sometimes I think, based at least on my experience when I worked in the school district, sometimes we physicians, but we don't do a great job of making sure that the folk at the district office understand how those positions relate to the schools and how the positions support the schools. So I think if we did a better job of providing professional development and making sure that everyone at the district office understands what their role is in assisting and making the schools better, I think that will help. I know there's been a lot of talk about coming up with an accountability system for teachers. Can we come up with some way of pay for performance? And I can't 100% say that I'm for or against, but I think that that conversation needs to be held with the appropriate people at the table to make that determination. And if there are any best practices out there where it has worked, we should try it. I know when I worked in Charleston, there was a conversation regarding it, but the educators wasn't too keen on it. And I think the fact that Charleston did not go with it and listen to the educators was great. And so, again, we should have the appropriate people at the table to make that decision. And even with our students, I think there should be, we need to work to have something in place to deal with our students who come to school and they're not ready to learn. You know, a child who is homeless or have gone through all kind of catastrophic things, and then they come to school the next day and sit in the classroom, and then we expect that teacher to teach that child at the level as though nothing happened, to me is not good for the teacher, nor is it good for the child. So accountability there should be so that we can determine those individual issues that may exist, and maybe have staff that can address the issues with the child and help the child figure out, how do I undress from the burdens that I brought to school so that I can be happy and excited about learning. And then, of course, the parents. I know there's some districts that had parent universities where they work with the parents and they help the parents so that they could be more involved with children. I know sometimes, and I know some students who have partnered with their parents and said, you go back to school, I go to school, we learn together. And it have the ones that I know of made great products of the students and even better products of the parents. So there's a need for accountability at so many areas, but I think it needs to be twofold with academics as well as finance, and we need the appropriate people at the table to take the elephant and decide what pieces we're going to address at what points in time.
Thank you. Jennifer Brecheisen, accountability.
Okay, can you repeat that question?
I talked too long. I'm sorry, Jennifer.
No, that's okay.
Sure. So in your opinion, what would a successful accountability system for education look like in South Carolina?
Okay, so are you meaning in terms of testing or in terms of teachers, or
it could be either? I
accountability
think
for schools?
we were geared more thinking about, well, schools is tied into the testing and the teachers part, but thinking about what we do now is we have tests at the end of the year that our kids take, and the outcomes of those tests determine many things. How do you think accountability should work or should continue to work for schools here in our state?
Okay, well, so the coronavirus pretty much got rid of all of our testing this year. I think we'll see how that has panned out. But I feel like we have way too much standardized testing. And I'm kind of torn because I feel like on one level we need standardized testing for accountability measures, but on the other hand, I feel like standardized testing is not really a measure of how knowledgeable or how smart a child may be, or how knowledgeable they are in a certain topic, because testing provides, well, I know personally for me, a lot of stress and so much anxiety that you can't get any sleep the night before. And my oldest child, he had the same issue where he would just feel like he knows the stuff, but it's so stressful that it's so difficult for him to sit and take those tests. So I think we need less testing at the state level, because I know that we have our federal testing and then we have our state testing, and then I think we have districts and areas that test even beyond that. I think Annie would probably be able to speak more to that, but I think we have too much, and I think we need to look at other places. You have, on one hand, you have Finland, who has one standardized test, like when the kids are like 15, and they have like such high proficiency in reading and math. And then you have places like Japan, who have standardized testing like all throughout the year. So it's like, well, they're both very, very high countries as far as their education goes. But I think that if we could look at other countries and other models, that we could actually hold our children more accountable, but in different ways, which would also hold the teachers accountable in different ways as well. I think there's too much time the teachers have to take out. It's very stressful for them. And I feel like they could be, that time and the money that we spend on testing could be spent on other things. So.
Thank you. Charlene here.
Yes. Okay, regarding accountability in schools, I think my perspective on this, and having had experience with this, that we do need to have some measure of accountability, how we stand nationwide. But it doesn't have to be all of these tests that we're having. Something that would just tell us how are our students doing in reading and mathematics and science or whatever. I think that's real important. But I think we can certainly, narrow the focus on which test those would be. Also, I think a greater measure, and we use this, and many districts have used it, and I don't know if they still do, it's called MAP testing. To me, children or students start at different levels when they enter school or when they enter each grade. We want to see that they make progress. I think that's a sign that we've given the students the opportunity to learn, and that a learning has taken place because there's been teachers who have taught them the things and more that they need. So I would agree, let's measure the progress of students from when they enter to when they leave each year. And that should be determined even on, whether students are retained or promoted or whatever. But it gives us a better idea, because most of those tests also will tell you the areas that the students are weak in and what they need to improve in. And these are less stressful because they're really measuring students against themselves. So I think less with testing that compares us to everybody and anybody, maybe just one that we could get some results, but most importantly, testing that reveals students' strengths and weaknesses and how we can help them be all that they can be.
Well, I want to thank you all for participating this evening, and end by giving you all maybe one final minute if there's anything else that you didn't get to touch on or anything you'd like to share about yourself in closing. And we'll start with Jennifer.
Well, I want to thank you guys for giving someone like me the platform to talk to people. When you run for an office that's not huge, you don't get a lot of funding, and you have a lot of, I'm sure they've had this happen too, people reach out, like political action committees, and basically I don't want funds from those people because they're in special interest groups, which means that I would feel like I was beholden to them instead of to the people that that voted for me or that want to vote for me. That way I could speak to the district and not, oh, well, I'm beholden to these people, so I need to, make my vote this way, or I need to push an action this way. So I wanted to really thank you guys, because you're just having this platform where all of us can actually just say our opinions and what we would do and how we would feel about certain situations, and we don't have to, we're not kept by anything. So I just wanted to thank you so much for the opportunity.
Charlene?
Yes, I too thank you for the opportunity just to share regarding education, which is at the heart, I think, of everything we do in South Carolina. It's the basis for success or failure, and I do appreciate that. I also want to say that with Jennifer, you are an educator because you're working with your students, because parents are the first educators probably, and will be the foremost through a student's life. And to Annie, what you've done already in the State House. And my only response would be that if you know me, my work ethic is very strong, that when I believe in something, that I will do my very best. And I am a creative problem solver. Sometimes it takes, more than just money. It takes thinking differently about things and flexibility, and that will be my commitment to you. Also, if you would ask people, they will know that I am able to rally people and work with people. I am a consensus builder, and I model that. I just don't say I want to do this and this, because I know I can't do it by my own self. I have the passion to serve. I want to serve, and my commitment is to do the best for the students, for the parents, for the citizens, and District 41. And I thank you again for the opportunity.
Annie, any last words?
Of course. And I just want to say thank you for having us. Thank you for this platform. And I know there's just so much more that all three to say that time didn't allow. And just so much, because I think education is near and dear to everyone's heart. And just want to thank you, Chris and SC for Ed, for how you guys have really, with your march, shine the light even brighter as it relates to the things that we need to do to make education better, and how the pandemic has brought to light so many students who are left behind as it relates to broadband, which we didn't discuss a lot, but I think that's probably near and dear to all three of us, in making sure that all of our students had access to broadband so that they can take advantage of e-learning just as all of the other students who can. And I know that we're all praying that God will send us a resolution to that. And then also, I didn't, when you asked the question about accountability, didn't say much about testing, but I think testing I think we're doing too much of it in the state. And Charlene wondered about whether or not mapping, and yes, we're still doing mapping. But I think with testing, we need to know what we're looking for. And then once we know what we're looking for, then determine whether or not the testing that we're given is going to give us what we're looking for. And I know a lot of the higher institutions require certain test scores so that students can, when students go into college, they use it to determine which students they will accept and which ones not as a factor. So we can't just totally do away with it, and we have to try to expose and prepare our students for testing, if for no other reason, so they can take those college and other entry-level tests that they will be exposed to. But I don't think that we should have testing to the point that it stresses our teacher, our administrators, or our students. So, and with that, I just want to thank everyone in District 41 for the support and for the for just trusting me the year that I was at the State House working, and this year that was interrupted by the pandemic. And just want to let them know that I will continue to work hard. I mean, this is, it's just being a legislator has so much opportunities, but it also causes so much stress, because we think that those simple things that we can and should be doing are easy, but they're really not when you have so many people come together with so many various interests. But one thing I do pledge and promise is that education and healthcare will always be near and dear to my heart, and I will continue to fight for education, whether I'm on the education committee or not. So thank you. This has been great. Gave us opportunity to meet Jennifer because I had not met her. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I want to thank each of you for taking time this evening to spend some time speaking about education issues to all of our voters. And to everyone who's watching this video, I just want to urge you to make sure that you make it out for primaries in June. And not only that you vote yourself, but you get your family, your friends, and your neighbors to do the same, because there's very few things that we can do that are as important as showing up the polls and making differences in our state and our communities. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.